4.2.1 Factor Quartics. The essential question is, how do I factor a quartic expression? The skill is, I can factor quartic expressions. Rob is finding the linear factors of f of x equals 2x to the fourth power minus 13x cubed minus 42x squared minus 27x. The first thing you want to try to do is factor out the greatest common factor. The GCF of this expression is x. You could take an x out of each one of these. So we write x on the outside. 4 minus 1 would be 3, so there's 3 x's left there. 3 minus 1, that's 2. 2 minus 1, that's 1. And then 1 minus 1 is 0. There's no x there. So to factor this further, we can graph it. We'll graph what's inside the parentheses to factor it further. And the degree of this one is 3, so there can be no more than 3 roots here. They're visible. We have -1, -1.5, and 9. So our zeros is -1, -1.5, and 9. Well, -1.5 is the same thing as -3/2. So we can write these as 3 factors. We have x plus 1, x plus 3/2, and x minus 9. We have the zeros. We change them into factors. The number that's here is what would make this cancel out. So like the x would really be a -1. -1 plus 1 would be 0. And then for this one, you'd have like -1.5 plus +1/2 would be 0. And then this would be like 9 minus 9. That's 0. So this would be your factored form. Now, sometimes you can factor them by grouping. Sometimes you can factor them using use substitution. And when you do that, sometimes you'll have 2 of the same factor, or maybe even 3 of the same factor, or 4, and then you would have however many times that factor is repeated right there. Like in this case, a perfect square trinomial would have the factor a plus b with a multiplicity of 2. And then sometimes you'll have a difference of 2 perfect squares. You would want to factor those further as well. Go ahead and try the other 4 examples below. The first 2, factor it by graphing. The second 2, factor it by use substitution. So think about use substitution. For example, number 3, think of it as u squared minus 8u minus 9. Factor that first. And then wherever you see a u, once you factored it, change it back to an x squared. If you see any difference of squares from there, you would factor it further. If not, you could just leave it that way once you plug in those x squares. Once you finish these, move on to the next skill.